Most people misunderstand attraction. They think it is built through constant presence, endless talking, and immediate responses. They believe that the more available they are, the more valued they become. But human psychology does not work this way. What is always available is rarely respected, and what is easily accessible is quickly taken for granted. The moment you begin to understand this, you start to see the power hidden in absence, in silence, and most importantly, in the act of ignoring. When you stop reacting to every message, every opinion, and every attempt to pull your attention, something subtle begins to shift. People are used to control. They are used to predictable behavior. They expect you to reply, to chase, to explain yourself. When you break this pattern, you disrupt their sense of certainty. And uncertainty is where attraction is born. The mind becomes restless when it cannot predict. It starts asking questions it never asked before. Why are they silent? What are they doing? Why am I not getting the same attention anymore? This curiosity slowly turns into focus, and that focus turns into attraction. Ignoring, when done correctly, is not about playing childish games or trying to hurt others. It is about reclaiming your attention and directing it where it truly belongs. Your attention is your most valuable currency. Every time you give it away too easily, you reduce your own perceived value. But when you become selective, when you choose where and when to engage, you create a sense of control, and control is attractive. People are drawn to those who seem centered, who are not easily pulled in different directions, who do not react impulsively to every external stimulus. There is also a deeper layer to this. When you stop giving constant validation, you force others to look inward. Many people rely on external reactions to feel important. They seek approval through your responses, your attention, your presence. When you remove that, even slightly, they begin to feel a void. And the human mind is wired to fill that void. They start investing more energy into you, thinking about you, trying to understand you. In other words, they begin chasing what you once gave freely. But this only works if your silence is backed by substance. If you ignore without purpose, it becomes emptiness. But if your absence is filled with growth, focus, and direction, it becomes power. You are not ignoring because you have nothing to say. You are ignoring because your time is too valuable to be wasted. This difference is everything. One comes from insecurity, the other from strength. You must also understand that attraction is not built through desperation. The more you try to force connection, the more it slips away. Ignoring creates space, and space allows emotions to breathe. It gives people time to miss you, to think about you, to wonder about your life beyond them. And in that space, your presence grows stronger, not weaker. In the end, ignoring is not about others at all. It is about you. It is about mastering your impulses, controlling your attention, and refusing to be easily available. Because the moment you stop being accessible to everyone, you start becoming valuable to the right ones. And that is where real attraction begins. Attraction does not grow in comfort, it grows in tension. Most people make the mistake of trying to create a smooth, predictable interaction where everything is explained, every message is answered, and every silence is filled. They believe this creates connection, but in reality, it kills intrigue. When there is no tension, there is no emotional movement, and without emotional movement, there is no attraction. This is where ignoring becomes a powerful psychological tool, not as an act of rejection, but as a way to introduce controlled tension into the dynamic. When you do not respond immediately, when you allow moments of silence to exist, you create a subtle gap. That gap may seem small on the surface, but inside the human mind, it expands rapidly. People begin to fill that gap with their own thoughts, their own assumptions, and their own emotions. And here is where the shift happens. They begin investing in you without you doing anything. Instead of you trying to impress them, they start trying to understand you. Instead of you chasing their attention, they start chasing your presence. This tension is what keeps the mind engaged. Think about it carefully. What do people remember more? The person who was always there, always available, always predictable, or the one who appeared, disappeared, and left behind a sense of mystery? The answer is obvious. The mind clings to what it cannot fully grasp. When you are always present, there is nothing to figure out. But when you pull back, even slightly, you create layers. And people are naturally drawn to layers because they promise depth. Ignoring also shifts the power dynamic in a subtle but undeniable way. The one who reacts less controls more. The one who is less emotionally available appears more stable, more grounded, more in control. And control is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. It signals strength. It signals that you are not easily influenced, not easily pulled into emotional chaos. People are drawn to that stability because it is rare. Most individuals are reactive, constantly seeking validation, constantly trying to maintain attention. When you step out of that pattern, you immediately separate yourself. But there is an important distinction you must understand. This is not about coldness or arrogance. It is about emotional discipline. There is a difference between ignoring out of insecurity and ignoring out of control. When you ignore because you are trying to manipulate or prove a point, it feels forced. But when you ignore because you are focused, because you are not desperate for attention, it feels natural. And people can sense that difference without you saying a word. As this tension builds, something even more interesting begins to happen. People start to assign value to you based on your behavior. They think consciously or unconsciously, this person must have something important going on. This person is not like the others. And once that idea takes root, it becomes very difficult to remove. Your silence starts speaking for you. Your absence starts creating presence. And your lack of reaction starts becoming your strongest signal. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, the one who chooses when not to be seen becomes unforgettable. Because mystery is not created through words, it is created through restraint. And ignoring, when used with awareness and purpose, becomes one of the most effective ways to build that restraint. And that tension is what transforms simple attention into deep attraction. There is a quiet power in being misunderstood, in not explaining yourself, in allowing people to sit with their own interpretations of who you are. Most individuals feel an uncontrollable urge to clarify, to defend, to make sure they are seen correctly. They rush to correct every assumption, to respond to every misunderstanding, believing that transparency will bring them closer to others. But in reality, this constant need to explain strips away something essential, is mystery. And without mystery, attraction begins to fade. When you ignore the impulse to explain yourself, you create a psychological distance that most people are not used to. They expect access, they expect clarity, they expect you to make things easy for them. The moment you deny that expectation, you force them into a position of uncertainty. And uncertainty, again, becomes the breeding ground for fascination. The human mind does not like incomplete information. It tries to complete the picture, to fill in the missing pieces. When you stop providing those pieces, people begin constructing their own version of you. And often that version is far more intriguing than reality. This is where the real shift begins. Instead of you shaping their perception through words, they begin shaping it through imagination. And imagination is powerful. It amplifies, it exaggerates, it romanticizes. The less you say, the more room you give their mind to wander. And in that wandering, you become larger than you actually are. This is not manipulation. It is an understanding of how perception works. People are not attracted to what is obvious. They are drawn to what feels just out of reach, just slightly hidden. Ignoring in this sense is not silence for the sake of silence. It is selective expression. It is knowing that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every emotion needs to be displayed, not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. When you operate this way, you begin to control the narrative without actively trying to control it. You become unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a composed, intentional way. And unpredictability is deeply attractive because it keeps people engaged. There is also strength in restraint. When you do not rush to explain yourself, you signal confidence. You show that you are comfortable with being misunderstood, that you do not rely on constant approval to feel secure. This kind of energy is rare. Most people seek validation through over-explaining, through constant communication, through making sure they are liked. But when you step away from that need, you elevate yourself. You position yourself as someone who is not easily accessible, not easily figured out. Over time, this creates a dynamic where people invest more effort into understanding you. They pay closer attention to your words, your actions, even your silences. Every small detail begins to carry weight because there is less of it. And when something becomes rare, it becomes valuable. Your presence, your voice, your attention, all of it gains significance simply because it is not given freely. But this only works if it is rooted in authenticity. If you are silent because you are afraid, it will feel empty. If you are silent because you are composed, because you choose when to speak and when to withdraw, it will feel powerful. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. One pushes people away, the other pulls them in. In a world where everyone is trying to be understood, the one who is comfortable being a mystery becomes impossible to ignore. And that mystery is what turns simple interest into deep attraction. Most people misunderstand the true nature of attention. They treat it as something generous, something that should be given freely to maintain connections, to prove loyalty, to show interest. But attention is not cheap. It is the most valuable currency you possess. And the moment you begin to give it without control, without intention, you lower its value in the eyes of others. This is where the strategic power of ignoring begins to reshape your presence. When you stop reacting instantly, when you delay your responses, when you become selective about where your energy goes, you introduce a new dynamic. People who once felt secure in your constant availability begin to notice the shift. At first, it confuses them. They wonder if something is wrong, if they have lost your interest, if your attention has moved elsewhere. And this uncertainty triggers something deep within human psychology, the fear of losing value. Because in truth, people do not chase what they already have, they chase what they feel they might lose. This is why controlled absence is so powerful. It is not about disappearing completely or playing childish games. It is about understanding timing. When you are always present, always replying, always engaging, you become predictable. And predictability over time becomes invisible. But when your presence becomes occasional, measured, and intentional, it gains weight. Your words start to matter more because they are no longer constant noise. Your attention becomes something to be earned rather than expected. There is also a deeper layer to this. By not reacting to everything, you train people on how to treat you. If you respond to every message instantly, if you engage with every small attempt for your attention, you set a standard that your time is always available. But when you begin to ignore what does not deserve your energy, you send a silent message. Access to you is limited, and limitation creates value. It forces others to step up, to invest more, to approach you with greater intention. Think about how power operates in any social structure. The one who controls their availability often controls the dynamic. Leaders, high-value individuals, and those who command respect are rarely the most accessible people in the room. They do not rush to respond. They do not feel the need to prove their presence. Instead, they move with a sense of calm detachment, choosing carefully where to place their focus. And because of this, their attention becomes something people seek, not something people take for granted. Ignoring, in this context, is a form of discipline. It requires you to resist the urge to check, to reply, to engage just for the sake of feeling connected. It demands that you become comfortable with silence, with gaps, with the idea that not every interaction needs your participation. And this discipline transforms how others perceive you. You begin to appear more focused, more self-contained, more in control of your own world. And that perception alone is deeply attractive. But there is a fine line. If your ignoring comes from insecurity, from trying too hard to appear distant, it will feel forced. People can sense that. True power lies in genuine detachment, the kind that comes from having your own priorities, your own direction, your own sense of purpose. When you are truly engaged in your own life, ignoring others is no longer a tactic, it becomes a natural byproduct of your focus. Over time, this creates a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of you chasing connection, connection begins to move toward you. Instead of seeking attention, you begin to attract it. And the irony is, the less you appear to need it, the more of it you receive, because in the end, people value what is not easily given, and they are drawn to what they cannot fully control. And when your attention becomes a privilege instead of a habit, your presence becomes impossible to overlook. There comes a moment when ignoring is no longer about others. It becomes about reclaiming yourself. Most people are so deeply entangled in the reactions, expectations, and opinions of others that they slowly lose their sense of identity. They begin to shape themselves based on how people respond, adjusting their behavior to maintain approval, to avoid conflict, to keep connections alive. And without realizing it, they give away control. Because the one who reacts emotionally is never in control. The one who observes, who chooses when to engage and when to withdraw, holds the power. When you begin to ignore what does not serve you, unnecessary drama, pointless arguments, subtle disrespect, you create a boundary that does not need to be announced. It is felt. People sense that certain behaviors will not get a reaction from you, and over time they stop trying. This is how silent authority is built, not through confrontation, not through loud declarations, but through consistent non-reaction. You become someone who cannot be easily pulled into emotional chaos, and that alone sets you apart. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who does not react the way others expect. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain calm, when they expect attention and you remain distant, when they anticipate emotional engagement and you give them composure instead, it disrupts their sense of control. They can no longer predict you. And in that unpredictability, you gain an advantage because most social interactions are built on predictable patterns. Break the pattern and you shift the entire dynamic Ignoring in this sense becomes a form of self-respect. It is the refusal to lower your energy to match situations that do not deserve it. It is the decision to protect your focus, your time, your mental space. And when you operate from this place, people begin to see you differently. Not because you are trying to impress them, but because you are no longer trying at all. And ironically, that is what makes you more compelling. There is also a deeper psychological effect at play. When you do not react, you force others to confront themselves. In a normal interaction, people rely on your response to validate their behavior. If they criticize you and you defend yourself, they feel justified. If they provoke you and you react emotionally, they feel powerful. But when you give them nothing, no defense, no reaction, no emotional feedback, you leave them alone with their own actions. And often that silence speaks louder than any words could. This is why ignoring can feel so uncomfortable at first. You are going against your instinct, against the social conditioning that tells you to respond, to explain, to engage. But as you practice it, you begin to feel a different kind of strength, a quiet confidence that does not need to prove itself, a sense of control that does not rely on external validation. You realize that not everything deserves your attention, and more importantly, not everyone deserves access to you. Over time, this transforms your entire presence. You become less reactive, more intentional, more grounded. Your energy is no longer scattered across meaningless interactions. It is focused, directed, and purposeful, and people notice. They may not understand it, they may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. There is a difference between someone who is constantly reacting and someone who is completely in control of their responses. And in that control, there is a kind of magnetism that cannot be faked, because the person who chooses what to ignore ultimately chooses the kind of life they live. You begin to understand your true value the moment you stop chasing attention. Most people move through life with a quiet desperation to be seen, to be acknowledged, to feel important in the eyes of others. And this desperation leaks through their behavior in ways they don't even realize. Replying instantly, over-explaining themselves, trying too hard to please, fearing silence as if it were rejection. But what they fail to see is that attention, when given too freely, loses its power. The more available you are, the less valuable you appear. Scarcity, on the other hand, creates intrigue. When you start ignoring people, not out of arrogance, but out of control, you shift the dynamic completely. You are no longer reacting, you are selecting. You are no longer seeking validation, you are becoming the source of it. There's a psychological tension that forms when someone cannot fully access you. Human nature is wired to desire what feels just out of reach. When your presence is constant, predictable, and easily available, there is no mystery left to explore. But when you pull back, when you create space, people begin to question. They begin to wonder what you're thinking, what you're doing, why you're not responding the way you used to. And in that wondering, your value begins to rise. It is not your words that create attraction. It is your absence that amplifies them. Silence, when used with intention, becomes a form of communication far more powerful than noise. This is where most people fail. They think ignoring others means being rude, cold, or dismissive. That is not power. That is insecurity disguised as control. True ignoring is subtle. It is not about pushing people away aggressively, but about not giving away your energy unnecessarily. It is about understanding that your time, your attention, your presence, these are assets, and like any asset, they must be invested wisely, not scattered carelessly. When you stop reacting to every message, every opinion, every attempt to pull you into someone else's emotional world, you begin to reclaim something rare, your focus. And focus is dangerous in a world addicted to distraction. When people see that you are not easily moved, not easily impressed, not easily available, they begin to assign you a higher status without you saying a single word. You don't need to prove your worth when your behavior already suggests it. The one who speaks less is often listened to more. The one who is not always present is often remembered the most. This is not manipulation. It is alignment with human psychology. People respect what they cannot control. And when you are always there, always responding, always explaining, you become predictable. And predictability kills attraction. Ignoring, in its most refined form, is an act of self-respect. It is the silent declaration that not everything deserves your reaction, that not everyone has earned access to you, that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on trivial exchanges. And once you adopt this mindset, something shifts inside you. You no longer feel the urge to chase conversations, to fill silences, to prove your presence. You become comfortable with distance. You become comfortable with being misunderstood. And that comfort is what separates the powerful from the ordinary. Because the truth is, the more you try to control how people see you, the less control you actually have. But the moment you detach, the moment you stop caring about immediate validation, you gain something far greater: leverage. People begin to come to you not because you asked them to, but because your absence created a space they feel compelled to fill. And that is where attraction truly begins. And once you reach this level of detachment, something even more subtle begins to happen within you. You stop measuring your worth through responses, through replies, through how quickly someone acknowledges you. Your sense of value becomes internal, grounded, unshaken by the unpredictable behavior of others. This is where true power lies, not in controlling people, but in no longer being controlled by the need for their attention. Because attention, when chased, enslaves you, but when it comes to you naturally, it elevates you. Most people never arrive at this stage because they fear the silence that comes with it. Silence forces them to confront themselves, their insecurities, their neediness, their dependence on external validation. But you, by choosing to ignore what does not serve you, begin to build a tolerance for that silence. And in that silence, you discover clarity. You begin to see people for who they truly are, not for who you hoped they would be. You recognize patterns, intentions, hidden dynamics that were once invisible when you were too busy reacting. There is also a certain discipline required here, because ignoring is not a one-time act. It is a consistent practice. There will be moments where you feel the urge to respond, to explain, to prove a point. Your ego will whisper that you need to correct how someone perceives you, that you need the last word, that your silence might be misunderstood as weakness. But this is the test. The ability to remain composed when your emotions are pushing you to react. That is what separates those who merely understand this concept from those who truly embody it. And over time, this discipline transforms into identity. You are no longer someone who reacts impulsively. You are someone who chooses deliberately. Every word you speak, every response you give, every moment of silence, it is intentional. And people begin to feel that intention. They sense that you are not operating on impulse, but on control, that nothing about you is accidental. And this perception alone elevates your presence in ways that effort never could. Because in the end, the rarest thing in a world full of noise is not someone who speaks louder. It is someone who knows when not to speak at all.